And we are back. We're going to talk about how much tougher the horses used to be. This is Kingston here, the Hall of Famer Kingston. He won 89 races during his career, won numerous stake races. You can see his record here, only out of the money 4 times. Kingston was also a successful sire. He went on twice to be the leading sire in North America. And now Kingston was a top-class horse. He won stake races every year from 2 to 7. I'll show you a horse from the 1890s who wasn't a top-class horse but was a hard-knocking horse that liked to win. That's Logan. Haley Racing Form was founded in 1896, so their stats don't go back to the year 1890 and 1891. So there are no official statistics for Logan at 2 and 3. He did make 2 starts at age 2 at probably a major track that Daily Racing Form recognized. But you see here from this column in November 1896, first year that the form came out, says Logan's 97th win. Seeing that Logan won 6 races in 1897, it's pretty likely that he did win over 100 races. But you gotta love this here. At age 4, he made 57 starts. Age 5, 73 starts. Age 7, 61 starts. Age 8, 71 starts. Age 9, 54 starts. There's 52 weeks in a year, so for 5 different years out of these 6, he averaged over a start a week for the entire year. Ogden was a champion 2-year-old, and he too went on to become a good sire. But in the year 1901 in New York, he won 2 races on the same card. He won the second race going 6 furlongs on the main track, 112-1. Come back 4 races later and won a turf handicap, again as the high weight. Says Ogden came back very fit and in first-class shape. This was in September of 1901. And of course, in this era, you had your hard-hitting, cheaper horses. This is Camel here. Camel made 378 starts. Look at this, 75 at age 4, 71 at age 5, 62 at age 6, 72 at age 7. Run this horse every 3 days. Of course, Camel was a cheap horse, but the good horses of that era run hard too. This horse here, Danu, won the Kentucky Derby in 1910. He actually made 41 starts as a 2-year-old in 1909, winning 15 of his 41 starts at age 2. It'd take him 206.40 to win the Kentucky Derby, though. And you see here, his dam raced 128 times, so not only was he a tough horse, making 41 starts at age 2, but his dam ran 128 times. Of course, those horses all ran over 100 years ago. Let's look at the Kentucky Derby 75 years ago. Royal Mustang here. He made 27 starts at age 2. The Kentucky Derby was his 10th start at age 3. So he was making his 37th career start in the Kentucky Derby. And Royal Mustang did actually finish second in this race. You see, he's got a May 2nd 7 furlong breeze 3 days before the race. 2 days before the Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland, he breezed 5/8. He breezed another 5/8 in 101-3 2 days before his race 3 back. Trainer had to make sure he was fit with those workouts. There were years in the Kentucky Derby in the 30s, 40s, and 50s where you had like 6 or 7 horses in the field that had made over 20 starts. Some of them had races with 5 or 6 horses over 25 career starts. But here's a great horse from 30 years ago, Serena's Song. She made 10 starts at age 2, shipped all over, 13 starts at age 3, 9 in Grade 1 races, took on males 3 times, set the Derby pace. Age 4, 15 starts, 11 in Grade 1 races, took on males. These old-time horses were like iron horses, and they ran, and some of them retired perfectly sound. Logan, that great iron horse of the 1890s, it says before leaving Montreal, he was examined by a veterinary and pronounced absolutely sound. A remarkable condition for a horse of his age, 21 years, and a long racing career. Now, why exactly were horses so much tougher in that era? Certainly, very plausibly, you could say drugs. You didn't really have drug testing going on back then. I think it is very likely that drugs certainly played a big role in why them horses were so tough and so hardy. But as far as drugs go, I'm not sure you can ever stamp them out of the sport. A very wise old scribe wrote this about drugs 100 years ago. He says, "These rules, be it said, have never done more than to keep the practice within bounds. They have been powerless to stamp it out, and they always will be. Just as the so-called anti-dope laws upon the statute books are powerless to stamp out drug addictions among men and women, the turf has its submerged 10th. Just as society in the rounds, it also has its powerful but unscrupulous persons to whom the end justifies the means. To either class, it makes no difference how one is put over, so long as it goes over. These are men whose names never find their way into print, neither are they among those of the blacklists of any turf tribunal, who year after year ply their nefarious trade. Some of them in the minor places of racing, some among its show places. They get by just as many social highwaymen of all kinds do, and they always will. That's a snippet from an article that was written in the Racing Forum about 100 years ago. So you can definitely look at drugs and point to drugs. There really wasn't much testing for a while. Then you had saliva tests. As testing has got more and more advanced, though, there's always going to be guys that know how to beat tests and find ways around them. The next thing that you could look at, of course, is breeding. Here's an old article written by the great Walter Vosberg. It says the fact that Mr. Hancock's stallion Selt led the winning sires in 1921 is to me a source of some gratification. Some years ago, the late Major Hancock wrote to me asking me to buy him a stallion. He said he wanted a stallion that would sire 4-mile horses. He further stated that he had Selt, having leased him, but expected Mr. Keene would take him away before next season, and he must have another horse. It has never been my habit to deal in sales of horses, and so I informed Major Hancock, but in my reply I ventured to hope he would not try to breed 4-milers for the reason that no one would buy them. I further stated that if you have Selt on the farm, buy him and build a stone wall around him, for you cannot get a much better untried horse. The statement may sound extravagant, but as I added, if you had seen him win the Brooklyn Handicap, you would agree with me. And so he would, for Selt's race that day when he shook off first King James and then Fair Play was one of the best races I had seen for years. It takes a good horse to shake off two good contenders. Henry of Navarre did it when he beat Clifford and Domino at Morris Park, but it is a rare performance. Now, Selt was a horse that only made 6 starts in its career. This was at a time when you had horses who won the Kentucky Derby making 41 starts during their 2-year-old campaign, so Selt was extremely lightly raced. And as Vosberg says here, Selt did go on to be a leading sire in North America. And of course, Selt is also the broodmare sire, a Triple Crown winner, Gallant Fox. You see Gallant Fox here, he was by Sir Galahad III out of a Selt mare. And Gallant Fox is the only Triple Crown winner to sire a Triple Crown winner. He sired Omaha. If you ask me for my opinion on who I think the greatest breeder was in American horse racing history, I'd say it was John E. Madden. John Madden's father died when he was 3. Did some prize fighting, had some boxing matches for money, rode in some harness races. He came from very humble beginnings, but he was a phenomenal breeder. You see here it says Madden bred 182 thoroughbred stakes winners, including 14 champions and 5 winners of both the Kentucky Derby and Belmont Stakes. 5 of the horses Madden bred are in the Hall of Fame. He bred the first Triple Crown winner, Sir Barton. And Madden also bred multiple Hall of Fame harness horses, too, so it wasn't just thoroughbreds. And this guy isn't some blue blood. He's not some oil sheik. Like, this guy came from humble beginnings. And Madden also was a top trainer, too. He became a trainer and was leading trainer in America 3 times. And one thing about Madden, he wasn't shy or secretive. He did a lot of writing on the subject of breeding. I read several of his articles, and they were fascinating. Here is a very interesting snippet from an article that Madden wrote. He says, frequently I hear of a horse described as a quitter, or it is often mentioned that he stops. This is a recommendation for the horse, as after all, we are trying to breed a fast horse, and only fast horses stop and quit. The beginner will often tell you that he is going to breed stayers only. I know then that he is going to breed many slow horses. And one thing that certainly struck me over and over from reading Madden's writings, he liked unsound horses that had problems, and he liked horses that, flashed speed and potential and would quit. He had a lot of great takes and a lot of very contrarian takes. You know who would kind of be the opposite of a horse like what he's describing here? Zenyatta. Zenyatta's had 5 foals, not a single one of them have won a race, coincidentally. One thing about a good horse bet or a good gambler, they're always trying to get a positive ROI, and I kind of got that vibe from reading Madden's opinions on breeding that, he was the ROI king. Here's a good, amusing Walter Vosberg take on breeding. He says, horse racing and the breeding of racehorses is one subject upon which men are given the credit of knowing a great deal, but it has been my experience that there is no subject upon which men generally know less. The mistakes of horsemen, whether owners, trainers, or breeders, would fill many bulky volumes if anybody cared to undertake an enumeration of them. It is only fair to suppose that a trainer being constantly associated with horses is in a better position to speak of the chances of a horse for a race than anybody else, yet not infrequently I have heard it said that a trainer's tips would break a bank. And so it is in the field of breeding. The late Mr. Dudley, a breeder of national reputation, was wedded to Baywood as a stallion. In the spring of 1871, Baywood was taken ill, and instead the poor despised Virgil, used as a teaser on the farm, was bred to the Preakness mares as a makeshift. The result was that Virgil sired 4 great racers in Vagrant, Virginius, Veracruz, and Vigil. And a few years later, he got Hindu. Virgil also sired Kentucky Derby winner Ben Ally, by the way. But Vosper goes on, Baywood, on the other hand, never sired a horse above the grade of a plotter. So that's breeding horses for you, the sharpest of the sharp. Madden, he endorses unsound horses and quitters. Vosberg, who was the sharpest a lot of things of his day, he talked Major Hancock out of breeding 4-mile horses. And one thing that might get overlooked a little bit about the ancestors of the thoroughbreds, they were quite literally war horses. The ancestors of the thoroughbreds were used for cavalry and war. They were used to scout enemy positions. Those were hard times back then. They didn't have automobiles. There were no cars. And medicine, I'm sure, was not as advanced as it is now. I bet you guys have rides. If you had the choice and your ride could go maybe like 1 mile an hour faster at top speed, or you could have a ride that just didn't have issues and didn't break down, which would you choose? I think you'd take the sounder, hardier option. I mean, it's not like you could pull out your cell phone and call AAA. As far as the 3 foundation sires of the thoroughbred breed, this is the Darley Stallion page. They give a little history lesson on it, but it says the history of thoroughbreds involves war, long sea journeys, and a lucky find in Paris. The trio of dominant foundation sires, and they go into the first one, which is Byerly Turk. The oldest of the 3, Byerly Turk, seized by a soldier called Captain Byerly. He was the captain's war horse. He participated in some war in like 1690. Byerly Turk was quite literally a war horse. Then you got here in 1704, the Darley Arabian was bought in Aleppo, Syria, by Thomas Darley, an English trader and emissary of Queen Anne, who exchanged the horse for a shipment of rifles in the first arms deal in the Middle East. What a deal that was. They gave up a bunch of rifles and they got their great war horse here. Darley Arabian, Byerly Turk and the Godolphin Arabian are practically phased out of sire lines now. Everything is the Darley Arabian sire line, and it's virtually all through Eclipse. You see here it says 95% of modern thoroughbred racehorses trace their Y chromosome back to this single stallion, the Darley Arabian. And then, of course, you got the Godolphin Arabian. He was given to King Louis of France and was kind of passed around a little bit. And the story goes that he was found pulling a water cart in Paris. So you got Byerly Turk, quite literally a war horse. You got the Darley Arabian involved in like the first recorded Middle Eastern arms deal. They're trading their prized war horse in for piles of rifles. And then you got the Godolphin Arabian given to the King of France and pulling a water cart around Paris for a short while. We're not trying to breed distance horses anymore, and they're definitely not trying to breed iron horses anymore. And it's because distance horses quite frequently end up being slow. And ever since like the blood ran out with Kingston, iron horses are few and far between among stallions. You need to breed for speed, precocity, and what sells. And who would I say is like the crowning achievement of the modern thoroughbred? It's Flightline. Flightline. We don't get Kingstons anymore. We don't get these crazy iron horses. but we do get a Flightline. Those old-time horses would get smoked like you've never seen a horse get smoked if they had to run against Flightline. And so let's talk about Flightline. Flightline was out of an Indian Charlie mare, and Indian Charlie had some infirmities. He had something called wobbler syndrome, and I only know about this because I have a friend who was a handicapper in Southern California named Dave, and he was the biggest Indian Charlie fan ever, thought he was like the greatest horse of the 90s. Now, Indian Charlie only ran 5 times. His only defeat coming in the Kentucky Derby is the favorite, never ran again. But you see here, this wobbler syndrome is a neurological disease causing compression of the spinal cord in the neck, leading to incoordination, stumbling, and a wobbly gait. Most common in young, fast-growing male horses. Anyway, when Indian Charlie went to stud, he had like a pretty low stud fee that he started with. And like I said, he was a Calbred, only had 5 starts, and he was trained by a guy who was kind of a magician. So they weren't flocking to Indian Charlie with good mares. And my friend Dave out there in Southern California, every single year I'd get like a 30-minute rant every single year where he'd find like the book of mares that Indian Charlie was getting bred to, and he would be irate about how bad they are. And he'd just call me up and rant about it. I'm like, come on, man. I know this was a really, really talented horse. I saw a Santa Anita Derby. He was positioned ahead of the great sprinter Artax early. Real quiet, never got near him. But it's a Calbred with 5 starts, a magician trainer. Why does it have to be some great sire? And he would just persist. And the next year, look at this book of mares. And he's going through them. And I could not care less about it. Now, Indian Charlie did pop with some of those horrible mares that he would just rant and rave about how it's this great injustice, this great disgrace that good mares aren't being sent to Indian Charlie. So Indian Charlie eventually did have a horse named Uncle Mo, who was a champion 2-year-old, ran the fastest Ragozin sheet figure ever and Thoroughgraph sheet figure ever by a Breeders' Cup juvenile winner. And Uncle Mo was a pretty fragile horse himself anyway, but you got Indian Charlie as the dam sire of Flightline. Flightline sire was Tappet, only had a 6-race career. He was by Pulpit. I believe Pulpit only had like a 4 or 5 race career. Pulpit was the most brilliant son of AP Indy, by the way. Pulpit's first 2 starts at Gulfstream were unbelievable. But that's like Flightline. You got the Indian Charlie, you got the Pulpit through Tappet. Then you got the tail female families in Ogden Phipps, and it's like just the stars align there. And granted, Flightline wasn't some extremely hardy, tough sound horse with a big, long racing career, but that's what they're breeding for. They're breeding for that sensational brilliance. Here is Danzig here. Danzig, only a 3-race career. Had 1 start early in his 2-year-old season, then was off for 10 months. Came back in 2 allowance races. Never ran in a single stake race. This is probably your most commercially successful stallion of the last 50 years. And before Danzig, there was Raisin Native. Raisin Native only had a couple starts at age 2. Bo Tendon was retired. He was the sire of both Mr. Prospector and Alydar. And when I was a kid, those were 2 great stallions, Mr. Prospector and Alydar, come from Raisin Native. Bo Tendon was done at 2. Into Mischief is the red-hot stallion right now, and, he only had a few starts. Dick Mandela had him. I think he had like 6 career starts. But hey, that's about as many as Selt had back in, 1909 when horses were running every 3 days for like 4 years straight. So is drugs part of it? Sure. And now they got HISA, and HISA doesn't want to let them use things that can help horses. They complain about electrolytes and Lasix, and those are small potatoes compared to some of the drugs I'm sure them old horses got. But there is an evolution process with the Thoroughbred. The ancestors, war horses, iron horses. You had to be tough just to survive. So maybe the evolution of the Thoroughbred has something to do with it. Humans have gone through a much less extreme but somewhat similar evolution, and you see these baseball pitchers now. These baseball pitchers can't go the distance anymore. They throw harder than ever. They micromanage their arm. The basketball players have something called load management or whatever. The boxers take forever to schedule fights. Sometimes it feels just like athletes all across the board, even of the human variety, have gotten a lot softer than they used to be. But with horses, good God, man, them old horses, man. Give me Kingston. I love Flightline. He's amazing. He would smoke them old horses way more than anyone thinks. Give me the old horses, though, man. Give me the iron horse. I want Kingston. I want a horse winning 89 races and making 133 starts. Enough of these speed marvels that run 6 race careers. But hey, I'm not a breeder. And if I were a breeder, I read a lot of Madden. I have a lot of ideas. I would certainly not try to breed plodding distance horses. And I've learned from watching races. And if anyone's going to put me in charge of a breeding operation, you're going to get some quick horses. All right, so I hope you enjoyed our video. And we're picking on the great ones. Danzig, 3 lifetime starts, never running a stake. Great stallion. Very exciting racehorse, too, even though he never run in a stake. We aimed high here. We could have been picking on McLean's Music. McLean's Music, only 1 career start. He sired a Preakness winner. McLean's Music sired Jackie's Warrior. A beaten odds-on favorite 3 different times in the Breeders' Cup. Was odds-on in the Juvenile, got beat. Odds-on twice in the Sprint and got beat. Very good horse, Jackie's Warrior. And he was by McLean's Music. Picking on Indian Charlie. We could pick on countless ones. There's no Kingstons anymore. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.